somebody who wanted to kill a president for a former president or a candidate for president would not need a rifle. They could use a drone, correct?
It is a potential threat vector.
So this individual was identified as a suspicious person. Can you explain to us when a suspicious person becomes identified as a threat?
Well, I think it's also when a weapon or some other dangerous item is then presented.
A rangefinder would not render someone a threat as opposed to somebody who was under suspicion?
I think the rangefinder is what initially brought him to the attention of local law enforcement.
And why would the president be allowed to take to the stage while a suspicious person had been identified and before the Secret Service or local law enforcement were able to investigate the circumstances?
So at that time, Senator, suspicion had not risen to the level of threat or imminent harm.
Well, you didn't, ultimately, that suspicious person did become a threat. Do you think if the president had been asked not to take the stage and during the time it took to investigate, to eliminate that suspicion, that wouldn't that have been the appropriate way to deal with it?
Senator, it certainly is one way to do it. This is a challenge for law enforcement in general, is that being able to, you identify somebody that comes to your attention and you're trying to determine what are their intentions. This is a challenge for law enforcement. The individual came to the attention for suspicion. He's on the outer perimeter adjacent to the secured site. Law enforcement is circulating for him. But again, without additional information, at that point, we're not rising to the level yet where perhaps we should pull him off or delay him.
And I'm just suggesting that maybe, just maybe, President Trump's appearance should have been delayed while that suspicion could be adequately investigated. But I've always thought of the Secret Service as the best of the best when it comes to their willingness to put themselves in harm's way to protect the life of their person they are detailed to. And I think you described the very rigorous process by which people are screened. And I think you mentioned the 2% standard. People who are interested in serving, only a very small fraction of those individuals are actually accepted in the Secret Service because of the high standards that your agency has. But explain to me why the Secret Service, being an elite law enforcement agency, would delegate to local law enforcement or others who did not meet that same 2% standard. In other words, isn't that something that Secret Service should have covered as opposed to delegating it to local law enforcement?
So, Senator, again, this is where I went back to earlier when I said it was a failure to challenge our assumptions. We assumed that the state and locals had it. By no means do I want to diminish the commitment, and I'm sure you agree. State and local law enforcement do their jobs every day and protect the communities that you represent.
No doubt about it.
So I think what we made an assumption that there was going to be uniformed presence out there, that there would be sufficient eyes to cover that there was going to be counter-sniper teams in the AGR building, and I can assure you that we're not going to make that mistake again. Moving forward, I've directed our Office of Protective Operations that when our counter-snipers are up, their counter-snipers are up, and they're on the roof as well. And we do this all the time with our colleagues in the New York City Police Department when we cover the United Nations General Assembly, and so that is our TTP moving forward.
Director Rowe, I would just submit to you that those assumptions can be lethal.
Senator Scott, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me just follow up with what Senator Cornyn just asked. Do you know who makes the drone that the Secret Service uses?
That Secret Service uses?
Yeah, the one that that didn't work. Who's the manufacturer? Is it an American-made manufacturer?
I believe it is, Senator.
You-
I'll
can
get
you
you
let me know?
we'll provide that to you in a queue first, sir.
So we talked about this the other day. There's not, in our, very few times in history do our presidents get shot at. So you know that this is something that the American public is very interested in. So as Senator Johnson said, there's a lot of questions being asked. I was at church Sunday, and 3 people came up to me and asked me if there was a second shooter. So there's all this information that's not, you guys are not responding to. When I was governor of Florida, I had 2 mass shootings. I had the Pulse nightclub shooting. I had the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting, and we did 2 or 3 times a day, local, state, and federal law enforcement, FBI, everybody involved. We answered questions. What I asked you the other day is, why aren't you doing that? What you've allowed, what both of you have allowed, you've allowed the public to ask, assume the negative. And so, which I don't get. I think you should have been doing, and I think you guys should have been doing all along, at least once a day press conferences. I think that you've got to tell the public what's going on. Having a hearing is really nice, but how often are we going to do this? You're clearly not going to do it here for another month and a half. So I asked you the other day, why aren't you doing press conferences, and are you going to commit to doing press conferences? I think what you all said the other day, you're going to ask Secretary Mayorkas and Director Wray if you guys could do those daily press conferences and start giving the public information. What's the answer?
So, Senator, that's why, one, I'm here today. I'm here today to provide information and answer those questions. And we are moving towards doing more frequent releases of information, and we are willing to do that press conference. And once we get through this hearing today, we are going to, in all likelihood, do one this week.
Okay, so what's the commitment to the public that you're going to do press conference? Are you going to, it's what, 17 days? The information, we are sitting 17 days into this, and I'm getting asked questions that I can't believe are true, but the public believes it's true. So what you all are doing is you're ruining your reputation, you impact the integrity of the federal government. It makes no sense to me. So are you going to commit to, are you going to do it once a month? Both, and the FBI, the same thing, not just you. What did Director Wray say? Did he say you couldn't do it?
Senator, if I may jump in here. First, thank you all for your guidance in this regard. And in fact, we haven't done something every day, no doubt about that. But, we're focused from the FBI side on the investigation part as we laid out here today. We actually, based on your guidance, we did a media engagement, not a stand-up type press conference just yesterday, and laid out in full everything that I've shared here, and even beyond that, just in the interest of time. But we are, because of the intense interest in this and the implications and the national importance, we've literally provided everything through media and through journalists and here, all of the information that we have derived from the investigation thus far. We remain committed to do that in full, answering any and all questions and sharing any and all information we obtain.
Do you guys realize the value of going in front of the press and answering all their questions? You realize that if you don't do it that way, everything gets filtered. You get to put out all the information, and you should be providing. You should be every day say, this is what we know now. This is like Senator Johnson put together a timeline. You should have put together a timeline. You should immediately put out, this is what we know right now, and this is what we don't know. Like you've said, you don't know how the gun got up there, right? You've said it, but why have? That should have been out all along. Say, we're looking at it. It doesn't make any sense. We've done this. We've done this. We've done this. If you do, I just don't get it. Why what you're doing? You're ruining. I've said this about the FBI. The people that work at the FBI, people who work at Secret Service, they're great people. You're a black hole. You lose the support of the American public because people don't believe you're being direct with them. So I completely disagree with your approach. I just want to finish. I've got like everybody else. I said I did a letter July 18th. I haven't gotten any answers yet. I want to put it into the record, and I'd love to get the answers to this because this is what the public is asking for. They want more information. They want to know what happened, who's going to be held accountable, and how we're going to make sure this never happens again. Thank you.
Without objection, it'll be entered in the record.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here to both of you, and more important, thank you for your professional dedication, your personal bravery, and your devotion to the ideals of law enforcement. I know for both of you this moment is a painful one, and Acting Director Rowe, I've heard you speak in a private setting very emotionally and passionately about the need to take responsibility and take action that will assure accountability. And I know that you share a commitment, along with Director Abate, to full public disclosure to the maximum extent possible. We can make speeches at you, and I've made one myself in that private setting about the need for broader, fuller disclosure to the public, not just in press conferences, but in the course of your investigation about what you know and feel you can disclose without compromising your investigation. Let me ask you, last week, Senator Peters and Paul, along with Senator Johnson and myself, sent requests to both of your agencies to produce documents. We've only received a handful so far. Can you commit to when we can expect those documents?
We will get them to you as quickly as we can, Senator. And
Well, can we expect them this week?
we will work to meet that deadline, sir.
And when can we expect all the communications, the text messages that agents have sent to each other? Eventually, all of it is going to come out, as you know. When can we expect all of those documents?
We will gather them up and get them to you, Senator.
You, I think, took the position as to the local law enforcement responsible for the shooter on the roof, the snipers that were in place, that it was their job to take him out. But ultimately, doesn't the buck stop with the Secret Service?
It stops with us, sir, but let me just clarify. The perspective that they had on that roof, when I show you the perspective from what our sniper saw, he's on the downside of that ridged roof. Their perspective from the AGR building, looking out, their area of responsibility, looking left, they should have been able to see. You can see in that photo in Exhibit A, which we will make part of the record and turn over to the committee. He's already crossed over that bridge or the walkway and stepped up onto that roof. I'm not saying that they should have neutralized him, but if they'd have just held their post and looked left, maybe, and there's a lot of maybes there, Senator.
A lot of maybes, but somebody needs to be held accountable. And I think Senator Graham hit the nail on the head. We need to know who specifically was responsible for doing what. Who was responsible for saying to former President Trump, "Sir, it's not safe to go out there yet"? Who was responsible for making sure that those local law enforcement were doing their job? Who was responsible for tracking down that suspicious person who fit the profile? 10 to 25 years old, young male. The FBI has warned us about it year after year after year. Director Wray has come before us and said the threat is from domestic extremism. The lone gunman, we're all aware of it in law enforcement. So I think we need individual accountability here, and people need to be held responsible, in fact, lose their jobs, if necessary, to send a message that this massive intelligence and surveillance failure, as well as the enforcement failure, cries out for accountability. Let me just ask, in the short time I have left, what is the nature of the Iran threat?
I'm sorry, Senator, could you repeat the question?
What is the nature of the Iran threat, the threat to former President Trump that has been mentioned?
Well, we know that, let me be clear here, the terrorist regime of Iran have been targeting people, our country, for many, many years now. We've talked about that here before. I want to be clear about that. From the FBI standpoint, we know publicly they've targeted former President Trump. They've called for his assassination along with other current and former government officials. That's public information. It's well known to everyone.
A specific or imminent threat on July 13th?
We have no information that there are any co-conspirators, or that foreign or domestic, including Iran, related to this. But we're not, I want to be clear, we have no evidence of that. We're not ruling anything out. We're looking into all possibilities and leaving our minds open to that.
Was that on the minds of the Secret Service on July 13th, that there might be some threat from Iran?
Sir, as Deputy Director Abate just said, we're aware of the public sentiment and statements of the government of Iran to do harm to Donald J. Trump, and we use a threat-based model.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. President.
Senator Ossoff, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for your testimony today and for your service. Mr. Rowe, I want to begin discussing Secret Service staffing and the extent to which HSI or other personnel are augmenting or backfilling inadequate Secret Service capacity generally and on the day of the assassination attempt. To what extent are HSI personnel, for example, filling close protection roles that would normally or optimally be filled by Secret Service personnel?
So, thank you, Senator, for that question. So, as we have done, even back when we were with Treasury, we enlist during campaign years the assistance of other law enforcement agencies in that department. So, when we were in Treasury, we used ATF, we used IRSCI. When we transferred over to the Department of Homeland Security, we have brought that practice with us. So going into a campaign year or during a national special security event like the United Nations General Assembly, we will enter into a memorandum of assistance for the campaign with HSI. HSI will provide post standers, essentially federal agents, law enforcement, to be able to help secure a site. When it comes to close protection, the only time that we will utilize them is during a United Nations General Assembly, where they may be utilized to protect a low-level head of state or provide security at a hotel in New York City where those protectees are staying.
So on the day in question, all of the former president's close protection detail were full-time Secret Service personnel?
They were, and they were assigned to the Donald Trump detail.
Okay. Interoperability with other federal and state and local law enforcement agencies, specifically on communications. What have you determined to date played a role in failures to swiftly communicate between agencies the suspicion or identification of a threat?
Well, I think there was a delay in reporting, not having that real time. So as they were closing in on him, as information is known, as
Be more specific when who were closing in on him.
as local law enforcement were closing in on him, as he's seen scurrying across the roof, right? That information, and we're getting to the bottom of that. We're working on trying to figure out what was the delay. Why didn't we hear that coming out of the unified command? So based on the information I have right now, what I can tell you, Senator, is that apparently not having that real-time information is what really hindered us in being able to understand more than it was just the locals working an issue at the 3 o'clock. There was actually a little bit something more urgent than that.
Does it appear that that is due to a lack of communications links between relevant officials and agencies, or poor communications practices and a failure to report?
I don't want to rule out. I want to have a neutral opinion on that. So I don't know if it was poor practices. I can tell you that the interoperability, not being able to have that technical fix, which is a lofty goal to be able to do that, is something that has been a hindrance. But that's why we use a counterpart system.
So there, in fact, is not the capability when an intergovernmental, interagency team is deployed to secure a site like this and to mount, if necessary, a quick reaction. There is not currently the capability for example, state law enforcement, SWAT personnel, or local law enforcement officers to communicate directly with Secret Service officers on site?
So technically you could do it, but it would take a long time to get it done. And for a 1 day or an 8-hour operation, it requires a lot. And it would be months of planning, of knowing that we are going to go to this particular jurisdiction and that we're going to need your frequencies, the keys, and we're going to need to load you into our radios, and you're going to be needed to load it into ours, and vice versa.
Right. Well, this presents potentially, I think, an opportunity for the Homeland Security Committee. I mean, not just in an executive protection context, but any complex incident response, any counterterrorism, any natural disaster context. The inability swiftly to link personnel from disparate jurisdictions at the local, state, and federal level is a vulnerability for the nation, is it not?
I would think, and based on my experience, being able to talk to other agencies in real time certainly would assist in that response.
Mr. Chairman, do I have time for one more question?
No. Yes.
Thank you. I know others have touched on this. One of the things that's been most baffling to the public has been the failure to fully secure this structure, which even to a layperson's uninformed eye clearly presents as a site from which an attack on the former president of this event could be mounted. And it had particular characteristics that made it even more of potential value to an attacker. Just walk us through one more time. Is there not an established doctrine or practice or checklist by which such sites are assessed for threat and determine whether or not to be within or without of the security perimeter?
So, Senator, controlling high ground is something that is a must for us whenever we go into a location.
Yeah. Well, I know we're all eager for more information on why that task was not completed in this case. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. Senator Lee.
Why was President Trump allowed to take the stage at 6:02 p.m., exactly 17 minutes after multiple suspicious person reports were provided, complete with photos and information suggesting that the assailant had a rangefinder, something that ordinary people don't use in this kind of circumstance?
Senator, again, it was suspicion, not weapon, or there was never communication of that there was an individual with a gun or threat or other bad intentions.
How many suspicious person reports did you receive that day?
I'll get back to you on the exact number, but there were other individuals that came to the attention of law enforcement that day.
Would President Biden ever be allowed on stage under similar circumstances with an unresolved set of multiple suspicious person reports provided, including indicating that there was a rangefinder involved?
Senator, I can tell you that a suspicious person on the outer perimeter with local law enforcement attempting to locate would happen, but I would need more information as far as whether or not we would allow the president to go on or off. Again, for us, it comes down to weapon, a potential threat. Is the individual carrying an IED? Is there a weapon? Is there some other factor that now ramps up our attention to let's hold off on this?
If there were 8 shell casings found next to the assailant's body, but he was neutralized after the first shot, where do those other shots come from? Where do the other shots go?
As far as the assailant's shooting?
Yes. So did the assailant get out 8 shots, or were those shell casings left from the day before? Where did they come from?
The shooter, Senator, we believe fired 8 rounds. We had the shooting reconstruction team go out there for a period of days and collect all that. So we have bullet holes, bullet fragmentation, all taken back, and we're still putting together the trajectory and ballistic analysis, although we do have fragments of the bullets, and bullets have been collected in the distance from the shooter's weapon.
Gotcha, gotcha. It's my understanding that there was a sniper team assigned to a window with complete overlook, complete view of the roof, the same rooftop, the sloped rooftop where the shots were fired. It's also my understanding, according to some whistleblower accounts, that that post was abandoned. What can you tell me about that? Why was it abandoned?
So I saw that from the colonel's testimony, sir, and it's something that I've asked, and our mission assurance is getting to the bottom of. And there were two-man counter-sniper teams from the locals that were in that AGR building.
And so at some point they just left?
That I can't, I don't have an answer for you on that, Senator, but it seems to me that if even one of them left, there should have been remaining some additional eyes left in that building.
Yep. That seems like something that maybe should be one of the very first questions you address. I'm actually surprised that you don't know that already, and I'd ask that you submit to us in writing what you learn as soon as you learn it. Will you commit to that?
Yes, sir.
What can you tell me about, well, let me just state this way. Multiple requests were made by Trump's protective detail and by Trump's campaign team to the Secret Service for additional resources. I'm told that those were denied. And as I recall, the Secret Service spokesperson initially denied that such requests were made and denied. Why not tell the truth from the outset? What were they trying to do there?
So, Senator, I don't think there was any intention to mislead.
Seems like a pretty material fact, doesn't it?
I saw that report. Go ahead, Senator.
Will you commit to me that you will submit to us in writing what requests were made, by whom, and to whom, and when they were denied?
I will, sir.
Okay. Look, at the end of the day, we're looking at a situation in which, at a minimum, people knew that this guy had a gun at least 2 minutes before the shooting happened. I want to know what you can tell me about what happened during that final 2-minute period, where a whole bunch of people in the crowd saw and were shouting, "He's got a gun." During that 2-minute period, perhaps at the beginning of it, the local police started to climb the rooftop, and there was at least 30 seconds after which local police were able to personally observe the shooter with a gun, had the gun pointed at him. What happened during that time period, and why on earth was President Trump not removed from the stage at that moment?
So again, Senator, the reason why President Trump was not removed was, again, we did not have anything more than locals working an issue at the 3 o'clock. Wasn't determined as to whether or not it was the same individual or not, and there was no report of
the same individual as what?
The same suspicious individual.
Right, but we've left the category of suspicious individual at that point. You've got a guy with a gun on a rooftop 136 yards away from the stage. You know that he's got a gun at that point. What happened during that time period that did not result in President Trump, his protective detail, being notified of that and him immediately being removed from the situation?
Senator, what I will say, and then I'll turn it over to Deputy Director Abate. No information regarding a weapon on the roof was ever passed to our personnel.
How is that even possible? Do you want to comment to that?
Senator, again, I believe that information, and this is probably something my colleague can expound on, information that was in law enforcement, local law enforcement channels, but did not cross over and make it to Secret Service awareness.
Senator, just to clarify the timeline, so the individual was first seen by law enforcement on the roof at about 6:08. We're still working to perfect the timeline based on the radio comms and all that. It wasn't until at 6:11:03 seconds, the officer saw him and called out his arm. That was the first sighting where he had the rifle on the roof, and then he...
And that was relayed to the Secret Service Command Center at that point?
My understanding is no, Secret Service, it was not relayed to them. It's a narrower time frame, though. It's probably about maybe up to half a minute between the time he's seen with the rifle and when the shots are fired.
But there's still time. At that point, if there were an open channel of communication in which they were able to tell him, he's got a gun, take him out. You could still take President Trump off the stage. You could have him duck. You could have the shooter neutralized. Do you not have a channel of communication by which they can say, gun, take him out?
So again, Senator, that information stayed in local channels and did not make it over to Secret
Did they
Service.
not consider that relevant?
Who
You're
is
saying
they,
that
sir?
you're saying that the local police didn't consider that relevant enough to pass along to the Secret Service?
Sir, I think that they were in the midst of dealing with a very critical situation, and they articulated that over the radio, as I understand it. However, it was never relayed over to us.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rowe, can you put your first poster, your first demonstrative back up?
Please put A up, please.
Let's make sure everybody can see it. This is the photograph, I believe, that you took, your team took of the roof, the AGR roof. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so from this vantage point, as the law enforcement who are in those windows, as they look left, they should be able to see the shooter clearly there on the AGR second floor roof. My question is, why is there not a Secret Service counter sniper on that roof?
So, Senator, we're when we post up, our methodology is to look at things that can see in on our protectees so that they can provide that coverage.
But why is there not a Secret Service counter sniper there with clear line of sight? That roof has a clear line of sight to the former president. Why didn't you put a Secret Service counter sniper there?
The Secret Service's counter sniper role is to neutralize those threats that are looking in on us from where the protectee is, not necessarily
You think maybe you might want to revise that protocol in light of what happened here?
They were protecting the principal, and I think in
The principal got shot.
I understand that, sir.
So do you think you might want to revise the protocol? Let me ask you this. Who was the lead site agent who made the decision to leave the AGR building completely outside of the security perimeter? Who was that?
Senator, I cannot give you that name. This person is operational. They're still doing investigations. They're still doing protective visits.
Have they been relieved of duty?
Senator, they have not
I know
been
their
relieved
name,
of
by the
duty.
way. Why have they not been relieved of duty?
They are still cooperating, not only being interviewed by the FBI, but also by our Office of Professional Responsibility. And we will let the facts of the mission assurance and any further investigations play out.
Isn't the fact that a former president was shot, that a good American is dead, that other Americans were critically wounded, isn't that enough mission failure for you to say that the person who decided that that building should not be in the security perimeter probably ought to be stepped down?
Senator, I think you're using the word decided, and I think we need to allow the investigation play out to include.
Who did make the decision then? If it wasn't the lead site agent, who made the decision not to put that in the security perimeter?
Senator, you're zeroing in on one particular agent. I want to find out exactly what was the entire decision process. So I think I want to be neutral and make sure that we get to the bottom of it and interview everybody in order to determine if there was more than one person who perhaps exercised bad judgment.
Well, sure. My question is, why don't you relieve everybody of duty who made bad judgment? So, yeah, you're right. I am zeroing in on somebody. I'm trying to find somebody who's accountable here.
And
you're telling me that the person who made the decision not to include this in the perimeter has not been relieved of duty. What about the person who's in charge of the interoperability of radio frequencies between local law enforcement and Secret Service? Has that person been relieved of duty?
No, Senator, because interoperability is a challenge, is a greater challenge than just one person. On that day, we had a counterpart system. It failed spectacularly.
As the person who made the decision to send Donald Trump onto stage knowing that you had a security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir, they haven't.
Has the person who decided not to pull the former president off of stage when you knew that, in your words, the locals were working a serious security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir. Again, I refer you back to my original answer that we are investigating this through a mission assurance. And as opposed to zeroing in on one,
what more do you need to investigate to know
exactly what the decision-making process was? What more do you need to investigate
to know that there were critical enough failures that some individuals ought to be held accountable? I mean, what more do you need to know?
What I need to know is exactly what happened, and I need my investigators to do their job. And I cannot.
people didn't do their
I cannot
jobs.
put my thumb on the scale. Otherwise,
What do you mean put your thumb on
the
the scale?
objective, you're asking me, Senator, to completely make a rush to judgment about somebody failing. I acknowledge this was a failure of the
Is it
Secret
not
Service.
prima facie that somebody has failed? A former president was shot.
Sir, this could have been our Texas school book depository. I have lost sleep over that for the last 17 days,
Then
just like you
fire
have.
somebody to
And I will
hold
tell
them
you,
accountable.
Senator, I will tell you, Senator, that I will not rush to judgment, that people will be held accountable, and I will do so with integrity and not rush to judgment and put people
I can't believe
unfairly
that you
persecuted.
are unfairly persecuted.
Unfairly,
We've got people
sir,
who are
we
dead.
have to be able to have a proper investigation into this, Senator.
You said earlier that you've got to make sure that your protocols are followed, and unless there's a protocol violation, people wouldn't be disciplined. I would just say to you, I don't really care that much about your protocols. I think if your protocols don't provide for the fact that when a former president is shot, when an American is killed, when other rally-goers, innocent people who just showed up on the day, when they are shot at and critically wounded, if that isn't a protocol violation prima facie, you should revise your protocols.
Senator, I think this is where you and I agree. This was a failure, and we will get to the bottom of it.
Well, I hope you're going to do something about it. Let me ask you something else. The Real Clear Politics reports this morning that you were directly involved in denying additional security resources and personnel, including counter snipers, not just to this event, but over the last 2 years, that President Trump's team repeatedly asked for these additional resources, and you personally were involved in denying them. Is that true?
Senator, as I stated earlier, that is not true.
So you never denied any resources to former President Trump's team?
No, not me. No, sir.
And
not
you
personally.
weren't involved in any of that? You
No,
were never
sir, I
involved
was
in the
not.
decision-making?
No, sir, I was not.
Let me ask you just one or two other things here quickly. Well, whistleblowers tell me that, in fact, law enforcement were stationed to be on that roof and that law enforcement abandoned their post because it was too hot. Is that accurate?
Senator, I have heard that as well. Again, they posted up inside. And I think moving forward, as I said earlier, we're going to ensure that state and local counter snipers are on roofs.
But do you know if someone was supposed to be on the roof? Do you know if someone was in fact? That's what the whistleblowers tells me. That may or may not be accurate. Do you know that to be the fact? Was somebody posted to the roof, local law enforcement or whomever?
I do not know that to be a fact.
Well, can I ask you why you don't know that?
Again, Senator, we are looking at this, and they should have been on that roof. And the fact that they were in the building is something that I'm still trying to understand.
I just want to express my frustration, Director, that 17 days or whatever it's been, that whistleblowers are telling us more than you are, and you don't know, you haven't ascertained if there was supposed to be law enforcement on the roof. That seems like a pretty basic fact. I'm also told that local law enforcement suppliers offered the Secret Service drones, and you declined them. Is that true?
So, Senator, one, I've been very transparent and forthcoming.
Your agency has not been transparent and forthcoming, so please, let's not go there.
I have been forthcoming, sir.
That remains to be seen. You've been on the job a few days. So far, you've fired nobody. Now, the drones.
Thank you,
Were
Senator.
you offered drones?
Senator
So there
Hawley.
was an offer to fly a drone on that day.
And why did you deny it?
Again, I think the ability of local law enforcement to provide an asset, we probably should have taken them up on it if it was offered.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rowe, thank you for being here. I agree with what you said at the outset, that the individual Secret Service agents demonstrated remarkable personal courage, putting their bodies in between the line of sight of the shooter and the president. That being said, the bravery of the line agents is quite different from the decisions of Secret Service leadership. Secret Service leadership committed catastrophic security failures, indeed the worst security failures for the Secret Service since 1981, since the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan. It is incumbent upon this committee to determine why those security failures happened. Just after the shooting, Secret Service put out an official statement from your spokesperson that says there's an untrue assertion that a member of the former president's team requested additional security resources and that those were rebuffed. This is absolutely false. In fact, we added protective resources and technology and capabilities as part of the increased campaign travel tempo. Was this tweet accurate?
With respect to Butler, Pennsylvania, it is accurate, sir.
It is accurate that the Trump team had not asked for additional security and had not been rebuffed.
If you're talking about Butler, Pennsylvania, all assets requested were approved. If you're talking about the media reporting of assets requested, there were times when assets were unavailable and not able to be filled, and those gaps were staffed with state and local law enforcement tactical assets.
So I'm reading from the Washington Post, July 20th, 2024. Secret Service said to have denied requests for more security at Trump events. The opening paragraph, top officials of the U.S. Secret Service repeatedly denied requests for additional resources and personnel sought by Donald Trump's security detail in the 2 years leading up to his attempted assassination, according to 4 people familiar with the requests. Is that right, that repeatedly the Trump detail asked for more resources and repeatedly Secret Service leadership turned that down?
That is not accurate, Senator. Assets are requested. There's a process that is made. And
how many requests did the Trump team or the Trump detail ask for?
I can get you that number in a queue.
You don't know now.
So I can speak to the ones that were reported in the Washington Post, and we can go through them if you like.
But you don't know how many requests there were.
In general, how many requests since 2021 that the former Trump detail has made a request for assets?
You've had 2 weeks. You had a spokesperson put something out that is false on its face. By the way, did you approve this statement when it went out?
I don't know if I did or didn't, Senator.
Has this spokesperson, is he still employed? Does he still have a job?
He is still employed, Senator.
So he lied on behalf of the Secret Service. He still has a job. Did your predecessor, the former director, did she approve this statement?
Senator, our comms team, they send out statements, they do deconflict them, and they put them out.
Did she approve this statement?
I don't know if she did or did not, Senator.
And you don't know if you did either?
I don't recall approving it, Senator.
Will you commit to provide this committee in writing every written request for additional resources from the Trump campaign or the Trump detail and every response from Secret Service?
Senator, I will commit to providing responses and getting you the information that you are seeking.
Let me ask you something. And who makes the decision to deny those requests? Did you make that decision?
Which requests? Are you talking about the ones that were in the Washington Post?
Yes.
So the process, sir, is that a detail will make a request for either staffing, technical assets, that is handled between the field office and the detail. It goes up to a logistics office between our
Okay, so there's a bureaucracy. Is there a decision maker?
It's not a bureaucracy, Senator.
Give me the
it's a
person
process.
that's the decision maker. Is there one?
Senator, it's a conversation. It's not just an absolute yay or nay.
So let me tell you what I believe. I believe that the Secret Service leadership made a political decision to deny these requests. And I think the Biden administration has been suffused with partisan politics. Did the same person who denied the request for additional security to President Trump also repeatedly deny the request for security to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose father was murdered by an assassin and whose uncle was murdered by an assassin? Did the same person make that decision?
Senator, what I will tell you is that Secret Service agents are not political.
Okay, you're not answering my question. But you know what? Leadership appointed by the president, leadership appointed by the president is political. I have a simple question, yes or no. Did the same person deny the Trump request that also denied the RFK request? That's a yes or no question.
Senator, that is not a yes or no question. One, there is a process for a candidate nominee to receive protection.
Does the buck stop anywhere? Does the buck stop anywhere?
Bipartisan process that the Hill participates
in. It's a bicameral, bipartisan process. What cameral?
For a candidate,
you are not a Congress. You don't have a cameral.
Mr. Kennedy submitted a request that was referred over to the CPAC.
Okay, you're refusing to answer the question. Let me ask, because the failures on that day were catastrophic. By the way, is it true that on the day of the Butler event that Secret Service transferred agent from President Trump to the First Lady?
No, sir, that's not true.
That's been widely reported.
It's not true. There was one airport agent that actually went on the manpower request for the Trump detail. They handled the arrival at the airport
What
for
is
the First Lady.
What was the relative size of the Trump detail compared to the detail that is assigned to the President or the First Lady?
Senator, the former president travels with a full shift, just like the president.
What's so the exact same size? Is that your testimony, that President Trump had the same size detail that President Biden has?
On the day of in Butler, the agents surrounding him, it is the same number of agents surrounding the president today. There is a difference between a sitting president who also not only
Hold on, you're using president in a way that is not clear. Is it your testimony that in Butler, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump had the same number of agents protecting him that Joe Biden has at a comparable event?
I'm telling you the shift, the close protection shift surrounding.
That's a yes
what
or
you
no.
asked me, Senator, and I'm trying to answer it.
You are not answering it. Is it the same number of agents or not?
Senator, there is a difference between the sitting president of the United States.
Then what's the difference?
The difference?
2X, 3X, 5X,
National
10X?
Command Authority to launch a nuclear strike, sir.
I'm not
there are other assets
how many more
travel with
agents?
the president that
Sir,
the former president will
you are
not get.
refusing to
but
answer
the number
straight.
of Secret Service
Sir,
agents protecting him.
Stop interrupting me.
Go ahead,
You
Senator.
are refusing to answer clear and direct questions. I am asking the relative difference in the number of agents between those assigned to Donald Trump and those assigned to Joe Biden. I'm not asking why you assign more to Joe Biden. I'm asking, is the difference, is it 2X? Is it 3X? Is it 5X? Is it 10X?
Senator, I will get you that number so you can see it with your own eyes.
Senator Marshall, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rowe, there was probably 10 buildings within sniper range of President Trump on that afternoon. Why was the building being used by the sniper not in the security zone?
That's a question that I've asked, Senator. There was a decision that we were going to construct the site and it was going to maintain within the Butler Farm site, Butler Farm Show site. That building, that AGR, was right on the curtilage of our outer perimeter. And it's something that I, again, having been there and walked it, I had a hard time understanding.
So there's no protocol that says anything within 300, 500 yards, direct line of the president, should be in or out of the security zone. There's not a protocol that describes that.
So, Senator, what we try to do is we try to either control the high ground or mitigate line of sight concerns.
Okay. You've stated that on multiple occasions, President Trump's team was denied more of a detail, more assets. Who denies that? Who is the person that denies that, generally speaking?
So, Senator, there's a process. Again, there's a conversation had with the detail.
There's got to be a buck stopping. There's got to be someone. Who is the person? Is it a level within the D.C. agencies? Is it someone in the Pittsburgh office? Who denies this?
It has nothing to do with the Pittsburgh office,
Okay.
sir. It is a conversation between not only the detail, the field office, but also.
I don't want to know the conversation. I want to know who makes the decision.
The decision, sir, is it's our process between the Office of Protective Operations and the Office of Investigations.
Is there a title for this position?
It is called we affectionately call it the War Room, and it's where all of our logistics files into.
So it's a room that makes the decision.
It is a staffing and assignments officer.
Okay. Is the Secret Service required to do a briefing with all entities of law enforcement involved in the event of the days leading up to the event and the day of the event?
We do a police meeting, sir, where we start the initial
So it's required.
process.
Is it required? Is it part of your standard operating procedure?
The police meeting is what initiates the advance, and that is what is required.
Was this meeting held on that day?
The police meeting took place on the days prior to that.
Do you have documents of that meeting actually happened?
If we do, sir, I will get them to you.
But you're saying that it did not happen on the day of the event.
So I think what you're referring to is a briefing that the state and locals would have done with themselves. We did a briefing with our own folks. They briefed.
When did you? Did your people meet with local law enforcement the day of the assassination attempt?
Yes.
Okay, and you realize that the local law enforcement says no, that meeting never happened, and that's why we need to get these people in to talk to us, and this is why the FBI needs to be speaking up sooner than later and say that meeting did or didn't happen. Surely there's some type of documentation of that meeting one way or the other. Is there documentation of that meeting?
So, Senator, I can tell you that our what you're referring to is the counter sniper team seconded to Butler ESU. Our personnel met with the team lead from Butler ESU, and they discussed areas of concern, areas of responsibility, and that did in fact happen at the site on that day.
Director, I think you would agree with me that there were multiple individual and institutional failures the day of this assassination attempt. You have a $3 billion budget. You're still 2,000 employees short. And in 2022, the Secret Service had a 48% departure rate. That tells me you either have a cultural problem or just gross incompetence. Which one is it?
So, Senator, I would challenge that 48% departure rate. Let me get you some statistics that we have. It is not 48%.
But go back to the multiple failures that we saw on an individual basis as long as systemic. I think it proves that there's either incompetence or some type of a cultural problem within the SS.
So, Senator, I know you're not calling our workforce incompetent, and I know we do not have a cultural problem. If anything, we are dedicated to making sure that we don't have mission failure. And let me get you the hiring numbers that we have, because I think you will actually see that, no, we've actually done very well fairly recently with trying to make sure that we have the numbers that we need. Of course, we need more people. Everybody does. But let me get you those numbers, and I think let your own eyes
Would you also disagree with me when it's reported that almost 50% of the rank and file officers don't trust leadership within the Secret Service?
Senator, I think it's the right of every worker to talk bad about their boss.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Hirono, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, there is a lot that the Secret Service has to answer for in this stunning security failure. But I do want to follow up on Mr. Abate's testimony that an online profile of the shooter may have been found, and you said it contains anti-Semitic and anti-immigrant postings. Can you elaborate? Have you found anything further in the shooter's profile?
Senator, this was just discovered, as I mentioned, and it's being closely analyzed right now. We need to verify that it is, in fact, that it belonged to the now deceased shooter and that he made these comments. So that's why I felt it important in the interest of transparency to share that here, but add the caveat that we still have a lot of work to do, which we're working on quickly to determine that. It's of importance, I think, because if it is, in fact, the shooter that posted these comments, it's the first real indication where he's expressing what are described as extremist views and talking about political violence.
I take it that once you determine that it was, in fact, the shooter who posted these kinds of comments, that you will let the public know as well as this committee?
Absolutely, Senator.
I think, in fact, it is very important that many of the perpetrators of mass shootings, et cetera, have these kinds of postings online that are very anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, anti-everything. And it is really important as we determine the kind of profile for many of these shooters that we understand how critical it is that we are careful, how critically important it is that people are careful about what they're posting online, the misinformation, disinformation, everything else along those lines. This is for Mr. Abate once again.